All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're going to get started here in just a moment, but before I jump right into the workshop, I will do a quick intro for myself. So my name is Dallas Jansen, and I'm the marketing director at Bankert Marketing. I've been working with Bankert Marketing for almost 8 years now, and before taking this role, I took the Creative Communications program at Red River College, where I studied marketing and advertising communications. And prior to joining Bankert full time, I spent some time working in radio and also doing in-house marketing and communications for some businesses in Winnipeg. When I agreed to work with Richard on these workshops, I wanted to make sure that I was putting together content that would be genuinely helpful to our clients. So when coming up with the workshop topics, I knew that it would be important to do one based around writing content for your website. With that being said, let's get started on how to write for the web. Okay. Writing for the web is a very big topic, and it would be impossible to cover everything in just half an hour. So this workshop will be giving you an introduction to the subject. Today's workshop will be split into two sections. So number one is content, how to write content that resonates with your customers, and then looking at actually what content you should have on your website. And then we'll also be looking at structure. So we'll be talking about HTML tags, which is how we write headings, subheadings, paragraphs, stuff like that, and then also how that ties into accessibility. We will be taking questions at the end of the workshop. So if you have questions, feel free to write them down or send them in the chat, and then we will go over them at the end. We're going to start by talking about what a lot of websites do wrong when it comes to content. We'll look at some examples of what people do wrong and then rework those examples to show how they could be doing it better. So number one, they talk about themselves instead of their customers. When you visit a website, you'll probably notice that a lot of the time the content is focused around the business instead of the customer. And that can usually go something like, we've been in business for 20 something years, or our team is passionate about X and we do X. The problem with this is that your visitors aren't on your site to learn your life story. They're looking for solutions to their problems. Now, that isn't to say that providing history and credentials isn't important, but there's a time and a place for it. Let's look at an example of this. So while preparing for this presentation, I started to look around at websites that might fit this example, and one construction company that I found had this front and center as soon as you visit their website. We are a family-owned construction company with over 25 years of experience in residential and commercial builds. Now, this might seem like a great opening line as it lets you know a bit about who they are and what they do. But if this is my first time hearing about this company, I don't necessarily care that they're family-owned and have 25 years of experience yet. So as a customer, I'm on their website for a reason, and that reason is to see if they can help me with what I need. This type of copy is what many businesses lead with, but it forces the visitor to work harder to understand why they should care. If we were to rewrite that statement to be customer focused instead of business focused, it could look something like this. Build your dream home or business with a trusted local construction team that gets it done on time and on budget. This statement speaks directly to the customer and makes it about them instead of the business. So it leads with what the customer wants, which is their dream home or business. It emphasizes outcomes that matter to the customer, trust, timeliness, and budget. And it reads more like an invitation to the customer instead of just a business resume. Another big mistake that most websites make is failing to speak to the customer pain points. So instead of addressing what keeps their audience up at night, they talk about features, history, or internal processes. When you ignore pain points, your message doesn't really connect. Your product or service might be the perfect solution, but your visitors won't know that and won't care to learn unless you clearly speak to what they're struggling with. In our previous example, we did this by touching on budget and timeline, which is a huge consideration when building a home. To do this well, you need to understand what frustrates your customers, what's the cost of not solving their problem, and what would a successful outcome look like for them. Taking a look at another example, this time for an HVAC company. After doing some quick searching, I found the following. We service and install air conditioners and furniture, or air conditioners and furnaces in residential and commercial properties. This sentence completely ignores the customer and only talks about the company itself. It is vague and doesn't speak to any benefits or customer pain points. If we were to rewrite this statement to be customer focused and speak to the customer's pain points, it could look something like this. Stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer with fast HVAC services that save you money and keep your home comfortable. When we rewrite it this way, we focus on the customer's pain points and we immediately answer those questions. So, what frustrates the customer living in uncomfortable temperatures? What's the cost of not solving the problem? High energy bills, discomfort. What would a successful outcome look like for them? Comfort, energy efficiency, saving money. The third thing that many websites get wrong is they don't have a goal for every page. When someone lands on your website, no matter what page they're on, you should have an action in mind that you want them to take. Whether the goal is to inform, book a call, request a quote, etc., your website content and structure should be built around this goal and push people to take the action you want. As a business owner, if you aren't clear on what the goal for each page is, your visitors won't be either, and a confused visitor won't take action. Next, we're going to look at some general best practices for writing for the web. People don't read websites the same way they read books or magazines. On websites, people will scan and skim content looking for the information, uh, and they will ignore basically anything else. So if they don't find what they're looking for, they will leave and look elsewhere. Your website content should be clear, concise, and easy to understand, starting with the language you use. We want to use the language that our customers use and understand. Avoid high-level industry terms and technical terminology. Confusing a website visitor is almost guaranteed to make them leave. This can vary depending on your target audience, but generally you want to be writing at around an eighth grade reading level for most visitors and industries. Now, you may have a technical product or service, but your customer doesn't need, or in some cases even want, to know every detail of how it works. Let's use a bookkeeper as an example for this. So our firm specializes in comprehensive financial reconciliation and month-end reporting. This might be exactly what your firm does, but if I'm a small business in the market for a new bookkeeping firm and I read this, I might not necessarily feel confident in what that means for me. When we rewrite this statement to remove industry-specific and technical terms, it becomes a lot easier to understand. So we make sure your books are accurate, up to date, and ready when you need them. There is an exception to this rule, and that is if your audience is highly technical, like engineers or IT professionals or like anything medical related. In that case, using specific terminology can be the right choice and it can help show credibility, but just make sure you're still being clear. Using the same language your customers use is also important for visibility. Your customers are going to search the internet with terms that they know and use. So using those same terms in your website content will help your website show up better in search results. The next general best practice is to use short, active sentences. If you aren't familiar with passive versus active voice in writing, I would suggest looking into it a bit more. But to quickly summarize it, active writing puts the subject first and shows clearly who is doing what. This makes your content more engaging and easier to understand. Here's a quick example of passive versus active writing. So the first sentence is passive. Orders are shipped the next business day. The sentence doesn't say who is doing the shipping. The second sentence is active. We ship your order the next business day. This version is clear and direct. Another example of active versus passive before we move on. So passive, homes are built to the highest standards. Active, we build your home to the highest standards. Again, the active version shows who is building the home. And the third best practice for writing for the web is to make your content easy to scan. If you think about yourself and how you interact with websites, when was the last time you visited a web page and read the entire page word for word? Or even worse, when was the last time you saw a giant wall of text and read more than the first few sentences? There are a few common patterns that humans take when reading a wall of text or poorly formatted web content. And the most popular is the F-shaped reading pattern, where people will read the content in a shape that resembles a capital F, as you can see here in my little image. They begin at the top left corner of the page and they work their way across the headline or top section, and then they move down and continue reading. But this is where the drop off in attention usually begins. And then from there, they keep reading the first few words of each paragraph or section, hoping to find the information they're looking for without having to read the entire page. Making your website content scannable and ensuring the important information is easy to find will help make sure users read more of your content, as an easy to scan web page leads to people engaging with the entire page instead of following the F-shaped reading pattern. In order to make your website content easily scannable, it's important to first understand how the structure of a web page works. We're going to use this as an opportunity to switch up what we're focusing on here and jump into the structure of a web page and how to properly build them. Every web page is built using hypertext markup language, or HTML, which you've probably heard of before. And so HTML is the code that structures your web pages, primarily through HTML tags. When you write for the web, we need to use HTML tags correctly so humans, search engines, and accessibility tools can all read and understand your website content. In today's world of web design, you don't usually see the tags. Website and page builders usually have these features built into them. So you create these tags by working within your website builder. But just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there. The first tag we will look at is H1, or heading 1. This is the page title or the main heading on the page. It's usually located at the top of the page, and there should only ever be one on each page. It tells Google and the users what your page is about, and it's a good idea to include your main keyword in the page title. Next, we'll look at H2 and H3, or heading 2 and heading 3. These are used as section headings. They should highlight core topics or features. They should never come before a heading 1, and they should always be used in order. And then we have the paragraph tag. So every block of regular text is wrapped in a paragraph tag. Here's a quick mock-up of a very rough draft of a web page, emphasis on the rough part. But this idea is probably something you've seen a million times before, right? But what you don't see on the front end of the website is how each of these elements are wrapped in tags. So here's that same web page mockup with the tags visible. The page title at the top is the H1 tag, and we see here it's used as custom kitchen renovations. This is the single most important heading on the page. Next, we see the H2 tag, our process. H2 introduces the main sections of your page. You can think of H2s as the sub-chapters under your main topic. They make it easy for humans to follow your structure and also for Google to look at it as well. H2s are very useful for scanning. As we know and already talked about, people don't read word for word. They scroll and stop at section headers that interest them, which is where H2 comes in to use. And then we see H3 tags. These expand on the idea presented within the H2. So we have H2 our process, and then H3, we describe the process. So design consultation, transparent pricing, and professional installation. These are all specific steps within the process section. H3s give structure to the content and also keep it organized and easy to digest. Using these tags and this format will help you avoid long walls of text, which, as we know, are very difficult to scan and often ignored. Now, if you want to start a new section or a new main section on your page, we can add another H2 to present a new idea. This time it's our team. And then we use paragraph and H3 tags to further expand on the idea presented in heading 2. Headings will give your page structure, like an outline, where if we think of it this way, H1 is the big idea, H2s break it into main sections, and H3s go deeper into specific points. You can reuse H2s and H3 throughout a page, but they have to stay in order, as an H3 only makes sense if it comes after an H2. When people land on your site, they scan for relevance, and a well-structured page like this lets them find the information they care about fast. It also signals to Google what's most important. Some other common HTML tags that I'm sure you'll come across include H4, H5, H6, which is heading 4, heading 5, heading 6. And these can be used to further expand on ideas if needed. And then the second ones there are the list tags, so unordered list, ordered list, and list items. These are used to create bullet point and numbered lists, and they're great for breaking down steps or features. There's a whole bunch of other tags and code being used on every web page, of course, but these are the main ones you'll come across and need to use when writing page content. Another reason that proper structure is important is because it helps with accessibility. So screen readers rely on proper structure and tags to be able to navigate your website content. The same way that we scan content looking for headlines telling us we're in the right place, visually impaired users use screen readers to quickly navigate and listen to page content. Without proper heading tags in place, visually impaired users are forced to listen to the entire web page line by line in order to find the information they're looking for. Properly structured content scales better. So when someone's on a desktop, tablet, or mobile phone, structured content using proper headings, paragraphs, and list elements automatically adjust and scale for easier readability. And structured content helps users with cognitive impairments as well. So breaking content into manageable sections helps people with ADHD, dyslexia, and other cognitive disabilities better understand and retain your information. Now that you know how to write content for a web page, you may be asking yourself, what pages should I write? So outside of the obvious home and contact page, I encourage you to really think about what pages you need on your website and plan your website with purpose. When doing this, go back to the point we brought up earlier. Every page on your website should have a goal. And when I say goal, I mean an action or an end result for the user. A lot of the time, the end goal is to have people make a purchase, contact you, or book your services, but those aren't the only goal that you can have for your pages. In fact, you may need to have smaller goals set up on different pages in order to get the visitor closer to your end goal. And that's where other common pages like history, about us, testimonial, blogs, and more can come in. These pages are important for providing credibility and helping your visitors get closer to your end goal, even if it doesn't bring them all the way there. And always remember to include call to actions within your content. The best way to get your visitor to do what you like is to invite them to do so. Learn more, contact us, buy now, book a call, get a free estimate. Like all things like that are all calls to action that you should use to try and push visitors towards your goal. At the very minimum, you should be able to answer these questions about every page on your website. What is the purpose of this page, and what should the visitor do next? Some of the must-have pages that I'm sure you're very familiar with include the home page, about page, product/services pages, contact page. At very minimum, we think every website should include these four. The other pages that you choose to create on your website depend on your business and your goals. Some other common pages include testimonials, portfolios, blogs, FAQs, different cancellation policies, return policies, terms and conditions, etc., and so many more, right? I'm sure that we've all seen all of these pages and so many more. But when considering if a page is correct for your website, you go back to those questions we brought up earlier. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this page and what should the visitor do next? If you can answer those questions with confidence, it might be a good sign you should include that page on your site. Putting it all together. So when you combine everything we've covered today, clear language, purposeful structure, and accessibility, you create web pages that people actually read and act on. Some key reminders here before we wrap up and take questions. So structure drives understanding. Headings and paragraphs guide readers and screen readers through your content logically. Every page needs a goal. Know what you want your visitors to do and lead them there. Use clear, direct call to actions. So write your call to actions into the content and make sure it's visually easy to find. Scannability equals readability. Heading, short paragraphs, lists, key phrases, make your content easy to scan. And always think of your users first. Ask yourself, what do they care about? What problem are they trying to solve? Then write your content with the goal to answer those questions.